his brothers despise him because of what Jacob, not because what Joseph did, but what Jacob did. They despise Joseph. And then the other thing is mentioned right there in verse 4. And he's next to youngest son, so all the others, they're grown men. They're in their 20s, right? The vast majority of them, and some may be older than that. And so it's not like a schoolyard tattletale. These are grown men, and so their evil probably wasn't that he stole my candy bar. That probably wasn't the evil that was being told on them. The evil that was being told on them was probably more significant moral failings. We don't know, but you would guess that that's probably the case. And so here's Daddy's favorite son, and he's out here with us, and he's telling on us, and telling bad things that we do. Not good. Tom?
Sort of looking at Joseph's rest of his life, this concept of, appears to be more of an opinion that the brothers had than he gave the family report. But, look at it. He was probably given an honest report that, just showed them in an unfavorable light.
Oh, yeah. I think what he was saying about them was accurate.
Yeah.
But they didn't like it.
Yeah.
I had a thought there what Tom was saying, and I can't think what I have to come back to that. So a couple strikes against Joseph. Now this was on Joseph. I know what I was going to say. It doesn't appear that Jacob then took that and disciplined his sons in any way. There appears also then to be in this family a perhaps lack of discipline, a lack of fatherly guidance toward these other sons. He favored Joseph. He had these other sons. There's a report coming in that they're not behaving themselves very well. The text doesn't tell us, but there's no indication that Jacob reacted to those reports to discipline them in any way. And then later, as this unfolds, it seems like he was pretty detached from the others, even in regards to disciplining them. So, with all of that in place, verse 4, when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. This wasn't just sort of a resentment. They hated him. They could not speak peaceably unto him. They didn't want anything to do with him. They really despised Joseph. All right, so that's the start of the problem. Now, our author asked us another question. We might just touch briefly on that. Question 2 in our study guide said, this is actually on page 19, what evidence, if any, do you see in the text of the evils of polygamy? Well, I think we probably could see something there. Rachel was Jacob's beloved wife. Remember, her older sister, Leah, she specifically said that her husband did not love her. So Leah felt unloved. Rachel was obviously preferred by Jacob. Now they have both the wives and the handmaids have sons. And so not only was Rachel the favorite wife, now Joseph is the favorite son. That would never have happened if I wouldn't say it would never happen, but a lot of that would have been avoided if the fact of the matter was that Jacob only had one wife. So maybe this is also some evil fruit of polygamy. Thoughts or comments, Jacob?
Well, I can make the same argument about having more than one child. It doesn't prove that polygamy is wrong because Jacob had favorites.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I got some questions about that because a lot of people say, well, God allowed polygamy, but he didn't like it in the Old Testament. I don't know where I go to the scriptures to prove that.
That he didn't like it?
That he didn't like it, he didn't allow it. I know he allowed divorce because he didn't like it because Jesus said so. He didn't. I don't see where God says polygamy is bad in the Old Testament. You shouldn't do it.
Well, but what we do know is that the original design in Genesis 2 was a man and a wife. And so And Jesus seemed to, in Matthew 19:9, point them back to the original design of marriage. And so my argument, again, polygamy, it's never stated that polygamy is wrong. And some of God's great heroes of faith had multiple wives in the Old Testament. But what we do know is that the original plan was one husband, one wife. And Jesus, in his teaching, drew us back to that plan. All right.
It does have its challenge. This is one of the challenges.
Yeah, exactly right. All right. So now, to make things worse, Joseph has a couple of dreams. Verse 5. Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said to them, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf." And his brethren said to him, "Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream and told his brethren and said, "Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." And he told it to his father and his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee in the earth?" And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. Okay, so with all of the bad blood already existing, these dreams didn't do anything to help the feelings of the brothers toward Joseph. The first dream just involved, apparently, him and his brothers. And so they were binding sheaves in the field, and Jacob's sheaf stood up, and the others came around him and bowed down in obeisance. The word is used in the King James. So they worshiped or did homage or did respect, at least. I guess that's probably the better word to use. They did respect to Joseph. Whoa, wait a minute there. You mean to tell me you think there's going to be a point in time when we're going to bow down and do special honor to you? I don't think so. I don't see that happening. And then he dreams a dream again, and this time the sun and the moon and how many stars? 11 stars. And it says that they also, the word is used, made obeisance or paid honor to Joseph. Well, there was no doubt. And Jacob, the father, when he was told this, he understood. You mean that your mother and I, that'd be the sun and the moon, and your brothers will all bow down to you? It made the brothers hate him. Made Jacob sort of sit back and think, wonder what that might mean. Now, don't miss the point here. These are actually prophetic dreams, aren't they? These are dreams of prophecy, because that exactly is what happens. Right now, his mother is dead by the time that the family comes to Egypt. But in an actual, factual way, they do obeisance to him. He's like the number 2 man in the whole powerful nation of Egypt by the time they are reunited down there. And they actually do obeisance to him. And so these turn out to be prophetic dreams that Joseph has had. They come true. The brothers, they can't imagine that that would ever happen. They hated him all the more for saying so. But he was actually, the dreams were prophesying the future. Matt?
Joseph is an exceptional character. At least there's no hint of it. You would think that all this would go to his head and he would be puffed up by all this way that Dad treats him, these dreams, and but that doesn't seem to be the attitude. Even when he becomes king of Egypt, we don't really see that characteristic of Joseph of an attitude of being high and mighty and above them. It was love and care for his family.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And as you say, that notion seems to have continued even when he could have been otherwise. He was high and mighty, but he didn't act that way when they came down to Egypt. I remember a sermon I preached years ago, and I think I entitled it, Joseph, Good from First to Last. Really, almost every Bible character that we read, if we have very much information about them, you see some chinks in the armor. You see some letdowns, some failures. Now, obviously, some characters are mentioned so briefly that we don't get that insight. But of Bible characters of which we have quite a bit of information, almost every one of them, we see some flaw in them. Abraham, Moses, King David, Solomon. I mean, but it's hard to find a quibble with Joseph. Joseph is pretty good, right on. I mean, you don't see anything that you'd point out and say, whoa, that was bad. Joseph did a bad there. No, we don't see that, Tom.
He tells us two dreams that he related to himself. It was pretty easy for them to realize what their position in the dream was, and what Joseph's position in the dream was. It's not like the Lord had revealed it to him. Basically, Joseph told him, I had this dream, and this was me, and you did this. In the second dream, his father rebukes him about it, but then the next verse goes through that his brothers were jealous, but Jacob of Israel kept this in mind.
Yeah.
That he remembered it, and it has, you sort of think that he's going back to, God made promises to me, and as he started to put these things together, and then that sort of dissipates here in the next, few verses.
Yeah, exactly right. Now that expression there where it says that his father observed the saying, that sort of reminds me in the New Testament about Mary and Joseph when they went back to find him in the temple, questioning and answering with the scribes in the temple. It says Mary took these things to heart, or she remembered what was said. And Jacob, he observes this. He's making note of this. All right. So, how does he get then to Egypt? Well, the rest of the chapter is going to go on and tell us that story. Verse 12. This is Genesis 37, verse 12. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. By the way, that's interesting that they're back in that area where they had caused so much trouble. Remember, Levi and Simeon had basically decimated the inhabitants of that area over their sister Dinah. Remember that? So they're back in that area with their flocks. Verse 13, and Israel said to Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send thee to them. And he said to him, Here am I. And he said to them, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flock, and bring me word again. So he went out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Now, I wonder, doesn't say, but I wonder if he was maybe especially concerned for their well-being because of where they were tending the flocks in that area of Shechem, where there had been some real trouble in the past. Verse 15, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when he saw them afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast hath devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. And heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. So that was what Reuben's plan was. Merchantmen, and they drew him and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. Have we got a contradiction here right in the immediate text? At one point they said they're Ishmaelites. At another point it says they're Midianites. Which are they, Ishmaelites or Midianites? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, they're both.
They're both.
They seem to have intermingled the descendants of Lot and the descendants of Ishmael into a group that descended from two different people but became one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a contradiction. The terms are used interchangeably because they were both Ishmaelites and Midianites. Exactly right. So this is just probably a common sense sort of thing. Why should we kill him? What profit would that be to us? We could make a little money here on this deal. Let's sell him. And so basically, this was a caravan on its way to Egypt, taking goods to sell in Egypt. Well, they can sell slaves too, right? And so we'll sell our brothers to them, and they'll take him down. They can make a little profit themselves, and he's out of our hair. He's a slave in Egypt. We'll never see him again. We won't have to worry about this tattletale anymore. We're in Genesis 37, and we'll pick up the reading at verse 29. And Reuben returned into the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned to his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it and said, it is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. All right. So again, Reuben had a personal plan. And he initiated by talking the brothers into not initially killing Joseph, but just throw him in a pit. And the text tells us that he had the idea that he would come back later and get him out, and everything would be okay. Well, and apparently Reuben then had gone. Maybe he was out specifically with the flock. Maybe he was doing some duty in regards to watching the flocks. And the other brothers see this passing caravan headed to Egypt. And so they decide, might as well make a little money on this deal. They sold him as a slave to the passing caravan. Reuben comes back, and he is just beside himself. What have you done? And notice, he says, Reuben said, whither shall I go? As the oldest brother, I assume that he sort of was in charge of this operation, and that he was probably ultimately accountable for what has taken place here. And so he's saying, now what am I going to do? You guys have done this. Now, you've really put me in a predicament. Now what am I going to do? So apparently they come up quickly with a plan. They kill an animal, and they get the blood of the animal on this unique, specific coat that belonged to Joseph, the coat of many colors. They bring it back to their father, and they say, we found this. Is this Joseph's coat? And he said, oh, it is. Apparently it's completely unique and identifiable. And he says, no doubt Joseph has been torn by a beast and he's dead, and he went into mourning. Now this is really a very clear lesson about deception, right? Did they tell Jacob that Joseph was dead, that he'd been killed by a beast? Apparently they didn't say that. The text gives us the indication that they just let him draw that conclusion. It was intended, on their part, it was an intended conclusion. They wanted Jacob to think his son was dead, but they didn't tell him he was dead. They just presented this coat. It was an act of deception, right? Very equivalent to lying about it. They led their father to a false conclusion. Now, That's and we've made this point before, even here in our Genesis study. But the fact of the matter is, if we act in such a way that we purposefully cause others to draw a false conclusion, we cannot comfort ourselves by saying, well, I didn't lie. I didn't tell a lie. I didn't tell a lie. You did the same as tell a lie. And I'm confident that the accountability in that matter is every bit equivalent to telling a lie. If you intend to deceive, that's a sin. And what they did here was wrong. And so, again, a good lesson about basic honesty. Tom?
Sometimes our judicial system, you'll see prosecutors sometimes that they're so interested in having a conviction, they produce just enough evidence that they have to let the jury
Draw a false conclusion.
Draw a false conclusion. They might have other evidence that is contrary to that, but it's withheld or covered up or whatever. So you take the evidence that you have and you form a conclusion.
Yeah.
It's called circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
You could be, found innocent on circumstantial evidence, or you could be found guilty on circumstantial evidence. And either one of them could be false or true. It just depends on how it's presented and, how crafty the individual is that's presenting the information.
Yeah,
So,
exactly right.
Look at Jesus, the same thing. All he had to do was produce enough information that convinced the people, we're right in doing what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly right. Another way that this text is used, and I think it's really good, I think it maybe is one of the best places in all of the Bible to show the danger of trusting your feelings. Now, what do people do religiously? That is almost universally the way people judge things religiously in our day, how you feel about it. I think it's okay. It seems okay to me. I feel okay with that, right? That's sort of the universal approach that people have to religious service. It's how you feel about it. If you feel okay with it, then it's okay. And the point that we try to make is the problem with doing that is your feelings can be misled. You can have very strong feelings and your feelings can be wrong. And this case of Jacob about the supposed death of Joseph is the ideal illustration of that. Jacob, the father, he felt beyond any shadow of a doubt that Joseph was dead. And he went into a period of mourning, an intense period of mourning for Joseph. It was so strong that his other children could not comfort him. He could not be comforted in regards to his mourning over Joseph's death. Joseph wasn't dead. But the question we ask when we're using this illustration, could Jacob's feelings have been any stronger? Could his emotions been any more powerful than they were? No. He thought that his son was dead and he felt strong mourning for his son. His emotions could not have been any stronger, but his emotions were completely based on that which was not true. Now, so here's a person who's in our day, and the way we use this illustration is, here's a person in our day and time, they're very involved in their religious practices and they feel really good about it. They are devoted to this form of religion that they're practicing, and they are just 100% convinced in their own mind that they're right. They feel strongly that this is the right thing to do. Is it possible for them to be wrong? Well, yes, it's definitely possible for them to be wrong. Feelings do not establish truth. It didn't in this story. The truth was Joseph was not dead. The feeling that Jacob had was he's absolutely as dead as a doornail. Feelings can be completely wrong, and if we base our actions upon simple feelings, we can be wrong, right? This is a great illustration of that. Any thoughts or comments here? Dale?
Greg, when they brought him that coat with that blood on it, but they didn't bring him any evidence or didn't say anything, because it's all good when you brought him the coat. He got blood, something happened to
Oh, it was a logical conclusion to reach. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. You know, we said earlier that looks like one of the problems in this family was a total lack of parental discipline toward these boys who were adult men by this time, but their dad was looking the other way, apparently, at their misbehaving actions. And first of all, the fact that they would even consider killing their brother. Secondly, that they actually did sell him into slavery. Third, that they came back home and deceived their father into believing what was not true. All of that indicates these brothers are not, they're not upright, honorable people. And again, that probably points pretty strongly toward a failure on Jacob as the proper father. Tom?
In doing what they did, they eliminated a lot of situations. One, if they just come back and told their father a blatant lie, you know.
We didn't see him. We don't. Haven't seen him.
Have you seen Joseph? You know, I thought he was supposed to bring us something or come out and check on us. Has he come home? You know, you could see Jacob send him out and they'd search for him high and low. You know, or if they'd said something else, that, oh, he was captured by the Midianites. Jacob would have raised up his men and gone after him. But this way here, they just sort of come through and they eliminated the situation. They didn't have to do anything else.
And this act of deception was more powerful than a lie.
Right.
Yeah, good point. Good point. James?
Seems like another lesson we see back in verse 27, rationalizing our sin. So when they're thinking about, when they see the Ishmaelites and they say, well, how can we do this against our own flesh? How can we kill them? Let's just sell them in slavery. You know, that concept, well, let's not go to the extent of this horrible sin. Let's sell this, our own brother and our own flesh, to life of servitude and death, possibly, because he's just a piece of property. The devil's sly in that, you know, he can maybe not convince us to do something really horrible, but if he shows us something not quite as bad, we're much willing to take that instead, go with it.
Yeah.
So he's very sly in convincing us. Maybe if, especially Christians or those who are apt to do more right, if he can just convince us maybe not to steal something from our boss, but lie about how much time we work. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We're more apt to do
Yeah.
that. We sit there out here.
Really, that's a really good point. So they could kind of salve their conscience. We didn't kill him.
We can't kill him.
Yeah,
We'll sell him.
yeah, good point. And we'd like to think that that's not near as bad. One sin's not near as bad as another. Tom?
The warnings over and over and over in the New Testament about, you know, following false teachers. What's false teachers do? They convince you of something and then they remove you questioning whether it's right or wrong. You'll believe the false teacher because it's just so believable that it can't be wrong. And so even if there's evidence out there to support that maybe it's not so, or if you investigate, you find that they're false. So their whole concept is to get you to the point where you won't investigate or do any research on your own. If you don't do any research on your own, you accept it wholly what's wrong. And basically that's what, you know, Jacob's brothers did. You know, Joseph's brothers. They brought their father something that, you know, he just accepted and he believed it, so he didn't, you know, go anywhere past that. He believed basically false teaching.
He didn't inquire any further. And so if someone, even religiously, making the point religiously, understand that if you give out false information and people kind of grab a hold of that, they lock in on it, they don't look any further. I think that's one of the reasons why we're warned about as teachers. You know, and I think I brought this out just last week, James 3 verse 1. Be careful about being teachers, because know that as teachers you incur a greater judgment. You're going to be accountable not only now for how you act, but you're also going to be accountable for what you teach and how others may take what you teach and apply it. In other words, because some people, if they hear something, if it sounds good to them, they will latch on to that and they won't look any further. They don't investigate anymore. And so now you are accountable for sending them down a wrong path. It's a pretty strong responsibility in that regard. one last question in this section. We're just about out of time. But question 9 says, in what way does this incident show that Jacob continued to reap exactly as he had sown in his earlier years? I think the point our author is wanting us to get is, of course, Jacob was famous for deceiving his father to receive the family blessing. So he had deceived his father. Now his sons deceive him. Kind of interesting how that passed down from generation to generation. Is it a direct reaping of consequence? I don't know. I personally don't know if you could connect the dots there and say this happened because of what Jacob had earlier done as a young man to his own father. I don't know that. I don't really believe that these brothers, when they sold Joseph, were thinking, well, our daddy did a similar thing years ago. It won't hurt for us to do. I seriously doubt that they were thinking that. If it shows anything at all, it shows a weakness in Jacob, in the upbringing of his sons. He had not brought them up to be honest people, to be God-fearing people even. And that's certainly a weakness in his action. Dale?
This is kind of that same go around. It's you're grouping the first son, the one you think that David would be maybe the closest to, but yet here's one of the other sons that he loved the most, and it's kind of like a relapse of, the same family.
Preferential treatment. That's exactly right. Monty?
You can see a long history of deception in this family. Abraham was deceptive about Sarah, his wife.
Twice.
My sister.
Yeah.
Noah at least twice.
Yeah.
Then Isaac did the same thing.
Yeah.
Then Jacob deceived Isaac. Then Laban, which would have been these boys' granddaddy, tricked Jacob into having Leah first
Yeah.
as a wife. And going after this, well, then you see Jacob when they apparently had some kind of concept of animal husbandry and genetics passing on to make the deal with Laban. Well, I'll take the spotted, speckled, and the streaked, or the brown ones, and you have the better ones. Well, when it was breeding time, then he put what would have been the better rams out of the way and had his rams do the breed to get that type. So here was, in effect, another deception. And it talks about Laban changed Jacob's wages 10 times. So constantly.
And Rachel stole the household images when she left,
And it deceived
and then lied.
off the thing here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, these boys, and a lot of these would have been practically grown young men. So there's been a lifetime generation.
I had not thought about putting that list together, but that you just enumerated. But there had been a long history of deceptive actions,
Been taught lying's okay to get what you want.
or at least half truths. Yeah. Tom?
Even the thing with the ones that, came in against, Jacob's daughter, they really deceived.
They deceived him. If you'll be circumcised.
To be circumcised, and they come in and kill them all.
I think that's a good connection. There had been a history of this sort of deceptive activity in this family, and we do learn. We imitate how we've been brought up. All right, thanks everybody. Lord willing, we'll pick it up there next week.